The scent of fresh pine filled the woodshop as Andrew guided his student's hands on the planer. Easy now, let the tool do the work. Wood shavings curled away like golden ribbons, revealing the grain beneath. "It's beautiful, Mr. Harrison," the boy said, eyes wide. "That's the secret," Andrew smiled. "We don't create beauty. We just reveal what's already there." For 20 years, Andrew had taught students to build, to restore, to see potential in raw materials. His workshop was order and purpose, a sanctuary of certainty. That certainty shattered when he arrived home to find divorce papers on the kitchen counter, Victoria's handwriting cold and precise. "I want the house, 70% of savings, and monthly support." Her smile held something he'd never seen before. "You can't afford a lawyer who could fight me on this, Andrew." In that moment, his carefully constructed life splintered along the grain. The rhythmic scrape of sandpaper against wood filled the high school workshop as afternoon light slanted through dust-streaked windows. Andrew Harrison moved between workbenches, pausing at each student's project, his calloused hands occasionally guiding a tool or demonstrating a technique. "Easy with the pressure, Miguel," Andrew said, observing a sophomore pressing too hard on a planer. "Let the tool do the work. You're not forcing it, you're revealing what's already there." Miguel eased his grip, and ribbons of pine curled away, exposing the amber grain beneath. His face brightened with accomplishment. At the next station, Emma struggled with a dovetail joint, her brow furrowed in frustration. Andrew approached, studying the problem before speaking. "Show me what's happening," he said. "It won't fit," she sighed, holding up the misaligned pieces. Andrew nodded. "Let's think about why." He picked up her marking gauge. "Precision starts before the first cut." "Remember what I always say? Measure twice, cut once," Emma recited, a smile breaking through her frustration. "And sometimes," Andrew added, "the solution isn't forcing something that doesn't fit. It's stepping back and making a new cut." As the final bell rang, Andrew watched his students clean their stations, carefully returning tools to their proper places. This order, this purposeful attention to detail, it anchored him. 20 years, teaching woodshop, had taught him that creating something lasting required patience, precision, and seeing the potential in raw materials. He ran his hand along a half-finished bookshelf, feeling the silky smoothness where once had been rough lumber. There was something deeply satisfying about transformation, about bringing forth beauty through careful, measured cuts. Andrew's pickup truck rattled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial he'd partially rebuilt with his own hands. He noticed a new Mercedes parked where his truck usually went, Victoria's latest purchase. He parked on the street instead, gathering his worn leather satchel. Inside, the house felt different from his workshop, cooler, more sterile. The living room showcased Victoria's design sensibilities. Sleek furniture, abstract art, everything arranged with precision but little warmth. In the corner stood the oak rocking chair Andrew had crafted for their 10th anniversary. It looked untouched. "Victoria?" he called, setting his keys in the hand-carved bowl by the door. "In the kitchen," came her reply, her voice neutral. She stood at the marble island, scrolling through her phone, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of her successful real estate career. Andrew noted how she didn't look up when he entered. "How was your day?" he asked, pouring himself a glass of water. "Fine. Johnson property finally closed." She continued scrolling. "You have sawdust on your shoulder." Andrew brushed it away. "The seniors are finishing their final projects. Emma Ramirez is making a jewelry box that's really something special." Victoria nodded vaguely. "That's nice. Did you remember we have dinner with the Haleys on Friday?" I thought that was next week. She sighed. I texted you the change days ago, Andrew. Sorry, I must have missed it. He attempted to change the subject. I was thinking we could drive up to the lake this weekend, just the two of us, like we used to. Victoria finally looked up, her expression unreadable. I have showings all weekend. The market's hot right now. I can't just disappear. Andrew nodded, the familiar disappointment settling in his chest. He reached for her hand, but she shifted away, checking her watch. I need to make some calls, she said, already moving toward her home office. There's leftover salmon in the fridge. Alone in the kitchen, Andrew opened the refrigerator, staring at the carefully packaged meal. When had they stopped eating dinner together? He couldn't remember the last conversation that wasn't about schedules or bills or house maintenance. Andrew was rinsing his dinner plate when Victoria returned, a manila envelope in her hand. Something in her posture made him set the plate down carefully, as if preparing for impact. We need to talk, she said, her voice oddly formal. She placed the envelope on the counter between them. The kitchen's overhead lights suddenly seemed too bright, clinical. What's this? He asked, though something in him already knew. Divorce papers, Victoria said, watching his face. I've had them drawn up. My attorney said it's straightforward. The words hit like a physical blow. Andrew's hand gripped the counter edge. Divorce? He echoed. Victoria, where is this coming from? We've been together 23 years, and living separate lives for at least 5 of them. Her voice was controlled, rehearsed. Be honest, Andrew. When's the last time we connected about anything meaningful? If you felt that way, why didn't you say something? We could try counseling, work on... I've made my decision. She pushed the envelope toward him. I want the house, 70% of our savings, and monthly support. Andrew stared at her, disbelieving. That's everything we've built together. I've built a successful career while you've remained at the same teaching position for 2 decades, she countered. My contributions to our finances have been substantially greater. We agreed I'd teach because I loved it, Andrew said, his voice rising. Because we both believed in what I was doing. You never complained about my salary before. Victoria's face hardened. My attorney has outlined everything. You'll find it's all legal and binding. I'll need my own attorney, Andrew said, still struggling to process what was happening. Victoria's lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. With what money, Andrew? The consultation fee alone would drain your personal account. She gathered her keys from the counter. You can't afford a lawyer who could fight me on this. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I suggest you use the time to accept reality. The front door clicked shut, leaving Andrew alone with the envelope that contained the dissolution of his life, measured and cut with cold precision. Andrew stood in the kitchen, morning light pooling across the counter where he'd left the divorce papers untouched all night. His coffee had gone cold beside a breakfast he couldn't bring himself to eat. Time seemed distorted. Had he slept at all? The house felt like a museum of someone else's life. The front door opened and Victoria appeared with a small suitcase. She looked rested, composed in another immaculate suit. Andrew's heart lurched at the sight of her, so familiar, yet suddenly a stranger. You're back, he said, his voice hoarse. Just for some things. She placed her keys on the counter, carefully avoiding the manila envelope. Andrew stepped toward her. Victoria, please. We need to talk about this reasonably. 23 years deserves more than a manila envelope. She sighed, the kind reserved for difficult customers or stubborn children. There's nothing to discuss, Andrew. The papers outline everything clearly. This isn't fair. You know I can't match your resources for legal representation. That's not my problem, she said, her voice flat. I've built my career while you stayed comfortable in your little workshop. The dismissal of his life's work stung worse than the betrayal. We were partners. We made these decisions together. You never complained about my teaching before. Perhaps I should have. Victoria checked her watch. I have a meeting. My attorney will contact you about the timeline. Can you at least tell me why? Andrew's voice cracked. When did we become this? For a moment, something flickered across Victoria's face. Regret, guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. It's been over for years, Andrew. You just didn't notice. She picked up her suitcase. I'll be back for more things tomorrow. I suggest you start looking for an apartment. The door closed behind her with quiet finality, leaving Andrew alone with the untouched coffee and the weight of a future suddenly splintered beyond recognition. The law office waiting room smelled of artificial lemon and desperation. Andrew sat uncomfortably in a chair that had seen better days, surrounded by outdated magazines and faded motivational posters. This was all he could afford, a $75 consultation at a strip mall legal office advertising divorce help in flickering neon. Mr. Harrison? A receptionist called. Mr. Diaz will see you now. The attorney's office was cramped but neat. Luis Diaz, a man about Andrew's age with tired eyes and a kind smile, gestured to a chair. What brings you in today, Mr. Harrison? Andrew placed the envelope on the desk. My wife served me with divorce papers yesterday. She wants everything: the house, most of our savings, monthly support. Diaz nodded, scanning the documents with practiced efficiency. His expression grew increasingly grim. How long have you been married? 23 years. Children? No. And your respective incomes? Andrew explained the disparity, his teacher's salary versus Victoria's six-figure real estate earnings. Diaz removed his glasses. Mr. Harrison, I'll be straight with you. This is not a favorable position. Given the income disparity and length of marriage, some spousal support is likely justified, but what she's asking for is excessive. So I can fight it? You can, Diaz said carefully, but you'd need specialized representation. We're talking retainers starting at $5,000, likely rising to $15,000 or more if this gets contentious. Andrew's stomach dropped. I don't have that kind of money. Your wife likely counted on that. Diaz hesitated. There's something else concerning me. These papers are extremely well prepared. The forensic financial statements, the property valuations, this level of detail suggests extensive preparation. Meaning? Meaning she's been planning this for some time, possibly moving assets. Without proper representation, you'll be at a significant disadvantage. Diaz looked genuinely apologetic. I wish I had better news. Andrew stared at his hands. What are my options? You could represent yourself, but against her attorney. Diaz shook his head. Or accept the terms and try to negotiate slightly better ones. Andrew paid the consultation fee with his credit card, each digit of his PIN another nail in the coffin of his former life. Outside, the afternoon sun seemed mockingly bright against his darkening prospects. The empty house echoed with Andrew's footsteps as he moved through rooms that no longer felt like home. In his small study, surrounded by woodworking books and project sketches, he sank into his chair and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. There, beneath folders and old receipts, lay a photo he hadn't looked at in years. Two young men standing before a cabin, arms around each other's shoulders, caught in mid-laugh. Andrew and Jonathan Harrison, 5 years apart but nearly identical in their strong jawlines and steady eyes. Jonathan, his brother, the accomplished attorney whose name appeared regularly in legal journals and prestigious firm announcements. The brother he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Andrew traced the outline of the photo with his finger. Their estrangement had begun with something so small, a disagreement over their parents' estate, pride on both sides hardening into silence. Years of birthdays and holidays passed without a word, the distance growing until it seemed impossible to cross. "He probably wouldn't even take my call," Andrew murmured to the empty room. But what choice did he have? Victoria had calculated correctly. He couldn't afford proper representation. Jonathan, however, was a partner at Harrington Webb, specialists in high-asset divorces, the same firm whose name had appeared discreetly at the bottom of Victoria's divorce papers. Andrew opened his laptop, fingers trembling slightly as he searched for his brother's contact information. Would Jonathan even help after all this time? The last words they'd exchanged had been heated, bitter. In his inbox, Andrew found their last communication, an unanswered email from 5 years ago. Jonathan's firm profile appeared on the screen, his brother's confident expression staring back at him. The phone number seemed to pulse on the screen. Andrew picked up his phone, his throat tight. 5 years of silence lay between them, yet Jonathan was possibly the only person who could help him now. The irony wasn't lost on him, that his salvation might come from the relationship he'd allowed to wither through stubborn pride. His finger hovered over the call button as he rehearsed what to say. How do you begin a conversation after 5 years of silence, with an apology, or the naked truth of his desperation? Taking a deep breath, Andrew pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, each ring stretching into eternity as he waited to hear if his brother would answer the call. "Harrison?" The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, recognizable, yet distant. Andrew's grip tightened on the phone. "Jonathan?" It's Andrew." A pause stretched between them, laden with 5 years of silence. "I know who it is," Jonathan finally said, his tone carefully neutral. "It's been a while." Andrew swallowed hard. 5 years, 2 months. Another pause, shorter this time. "What can I do for you, Andrew?" The formality stung, yet Andrew heard something beneath it. Caution, perhaps, rather than coldness. He took a deep breath. "I need your help. Victoria's filed for divorce. She wants everything, the house, savings, monthly support. Her attorney is, well, I can't afford to fight this." "I see." The professional tone remained, but Andrew detected a slight shift. "When were you served?" "Yesterday. I tried talking to her this morning, but she's—" Andrew's voice faltered. "Unwilling to negotiate," Jonathan finished for him. "Yes. I had a consultation with a budget attorney today. He said, I need specialized representation, but the retainer alone is more than I have." Keyboard clicks sounded in the background. "Who's representing her?" "Harrington and Webb." A sharp intake of breath. "That's a problem. They're aggressive. Good, but aggressive." Andrew closed his eyes. "I know. That's why I'm calling. You're the only person I know who might—" "I understand if you can't—" "I'll look at the papers," Jonathan interrupted. "Can you come to my office tomorrow, 9 o'clock? Relief washed over Andrew, followed immediately by awkwardness. 5 years of birthdays, holidays, and milestones crystallized into a business meeting. "I'll be there. And Jonathan, thank you." Don't thank me yet. This won't be easy. A hesitation. It's Harrington Webb, Suite 1200 downtown. I know where it is, Andrew said softly. I've seen the announcements about your partnership. Another pause. 9 o'clock, Jonathan repeated, then ended the call. Andrew set down the phone, the connection broken, yet somehow, tentatively, re-established. Harrington Webb occupied the top floor of a glass tower that made Andrew feel underdressed despite his best suit. The reception area gleamed with marble and success, modern art adorning walls that had probably never known a draft. Mr. Harrison? A polished receptionist approached. Mr. Harrison will see you now. The deliberate use of their shared surname wasn't lost on Andrew. Jonathan's corner office offered sweeping city views through floor-to-ceiling windows. His brother stood as Andrew entered, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. The resemblance was striking. Same height, same jawline, same Harrison eyes. Yet Jonathan's tailored suit and confident posture projected an authority Andrew had never claimed. Andrew. Jonathan extended his hand, the gesture formal, yet somehow bridge-building. Andrew shook it, noting the firmness of his brother's grip. Thank you for seeing me. Sit down. Jonathan gestured to a chair across from his immaculate desk. I've reviewed the filing. Andrew handed over the envelope. Here's the original. Jonathan scanned the documents, his expression growing increasingly focused. This is aggressive, even for Harrington Webb. They're asking for 70% of joint assets plus ongoing support. It's excessive. Can we fight it? We can. Jonathan emphasized the we slightly. But I need to understand everything. How long have you been having marital problems? That's just it. I didn't think things were distant, but I never expected this. Jonathan's eyebrow raised slightly. No warning signs at all? More expensive purchases, working later, less conversation. Andrew shook his head. I thought it was just her career advancing. Jonathan made notes on a legal pad, his handwriting precise. Joint accounts? Checking and savings. She has her separate accounts, too, for her real estate business. Credit cards? One joint, separate ones for personal use. Jonathan nodded, continuing methodically through financial, property, and relationship questions. His efficiency was impressive and somewhat intimidating. I need you to sign these. Jonathan slid papers across the desk. Client representation agreement and authorization for financial investigation. Andrew hesitated. I can't afford your regular fees, Jonathan. Something flickered in Jonathan's eyes. We'll discuss that later. Right now, we need to move quickly. As Andrew signed, Jonathan's assistant entered with coffee. Andrew noticed the office held no personal photos, no family, no vacations, nothing of the past they'd once shared. I'm going to assemble a team, Jonathan said, his voice shifting to strategy mode. Financial forensics, property valuation, witness interviews if necessary. Victoria may have been planning this for some time, which means there could be evidence of asset movement or other activities that strengthen our position. Andrew nodded, simultaneously grateful and disoriented by his brother's clinical approach to dismantling his marriage. We'll be in touch daily, Jonathan concluded, standing to signal the meeting's end. And Andrew, try not to worry. That's my job now. For a brief moment, beneath the professional veneer, Andrew glimpsed his brother again. 3 days of silence had left Andrew wondering if Jonathan had reconsidered helping him. He'd jumped at every phone notification, caught between hope and anxiety as he tried to maintain normalcy in his classroom. When his phone finally rang at 10:43 p.m., Andrew nearly dropped it in his haste to answer. Jonathan? Are you sitting down? His brother's voice sounded different, controlled, but with an edge of suppressed emotion. "What is it? What did you find? I'm sending you something." Check your email now." Andrew opened his laptop, heart pounding. The email contained only a PDF attachment labeled VH Communications. He clicked it open. The first image was a text message exchange dated 8 months earlier. "Richard, when can you get away?" Victoria, "Thursday. Told him I have a client dinner." Richard, "Hale Realty misses its best agent." Victoria, "Harrison, Hale has a better ring. Just need to get rid of the current Harrison." Andrew's hands shook as he scrolled through dozens more exchanges, each more damning than the last. Photos followed. Victoria with Richard Hale, her former business partner, in intimate situations. Dinner dates, hotel rooms, planning sessions about their future. Richard Hale, Andrew finally managed. "She's been having an affair, yes, for at least 14 months, based on the evidence. Possibly longer." "How did you find this?" "Digital forensics team. They've only scratched the surface." Jonathan paused. "There's more, Andrew. More than an affair with her ex-partner?" "The affair is just the beginning. They've been planning this divorce, strategizing about how to maximize her financial gain. There are messages discussing how to ensure you couldn't afford proper representation." The calculated betrayal hit Andrew like a physical blow. Not just infidelity, but a deliberate scheme to strip him of everything. "I trusted her completely," Andrew whispered. Jonathan's voice softened slightly. "I know. Listen, Andrew, I'm still working. There are financial records we're examining, bank transfers that don't add up." "What do you mean?" "I think she's been moving money. Significant amounts. I need more time to document everything properly." Andrew closed the laptop, unable to look at the evidence any longer. "I never thought she could do something like this." "That's why it worked," Jonathan said, his professional tone slipping into something more personal, more protective. "Andrew, there's something else you should know." "What is it?" Jonathan's voice dropped lower, grimmer. "It's worse, much worse. I'll call you tomorrow when I have everything documented." The call ended, leaving Andrew staring at the dark screen, his world fracturing further with each revelation. The only comfort, the unexpected alliance with the brother he'd thought lost to him. The conference room at Harrington Webb felt like an operating theater, clinically lit, with 3 large screens displaying spreadsheets, bank statements, and transaction records. Andrew sat at the polished table, a half-empty coffee cup growing cold before him, as Melissa Chen, Jonathan's financial investigator, continued her methodical presentation. "Over the past 16 months, we've documented a systematic pattern of fund diversion," she explained, highlighting a spreadsheet column. "Mrs. Harrison made 57 separate transfers from your joint accounts to a shell company called Vista Properties, totaling just over $60,000. Andrew stared at the numbers, each one a small betrayal adding up to something devastating. "I never noticed." "The transfers were strategically timed and sized to avoid triggering alerts," Melissa continued, "usually following your regular deposits and never exceeding $3,000 at once." Jonathan, who had been standing near the window, moved closer to Andrew. "She knew your patterns. When you checked accounts, what you'd notice." "Vista Properties is registered to Richard Hale's brother-in-law," Melissa added, bringing up incorporation documents. The money was then transferred again to an offshore account in the Caymans. Andrew's head felt heavy. $60,000. That's most of our emergency fund, our retirement cushion. "It gets worse," Jonathan said, his professional tone softening slightly. "We found evidence that the house equity line was increased without your knowledge. Your signature was forged on the documents. Andrew looked up sharply. That's illegal. Extremely, Jonathan confirmed. Victoria used your joint credit history to secure the additional $30,000, then diverted those funds as well. Andrew's hands curled into fists. All those years saving, planning. She knew how important financial security was to me. This level of planning indicates premeditation far beyond a simple affair, Melissa observed, her clinical tone making the betrayal somehow more stark. Jonathan dismissed Melissa with a nod, then sat beside Andrew. For the first time, he wasn't across the desk, but next to his brother. Andrew, I need to ask, did you ever suspect anything? No, Andrew whispered, the weight of his blindness crushing him. I trusted her completely. Jonathan's hand moved slightly toward Andrew's shoulder, then hesitated before finally completing the gesture, an awkward but genuine attempt at comfort. There's more, Jonathan said quietly, and it's not just about the money. Jonathan pressed a button on the conference room remote. The financial displays disappeared, replaced by text messages and emails between Victoria and Richard Hale. The timestamps stretched back nearly 2 years. We recovered these from cloud backups, Jonathan explained. Victoria thought she'd deleted them from her devices. Andrew forced himself to read the exchanges, each one cutting deeper than the last. Victoria. He still has no idea. Teaching his precious students while we plan our future. Richard. How long until we implement Phase 2? Victoria. Need to secure the finances first. The woodshop teacher makes pennies compared to what I'm bringing in. Another exchange, dated 3 months ago. Richard. You sure we can get everything? Victoria. Absolutely. He'll be too proud to ask for help and can't afford real representation. Richard. The gentle craftsman routine finally pays off for us. Victoria. His sensitivity is our best asset. He'll roll over rather than fight. Andrew pushed back from the table, bile rising in his throat. They were mocking me, my career, my who I am. Jonathan's professional mask slipped further, his eyes darkening with anger. There's worse. He hesitated. Are you sure you want to see it? Show me everything, Andrew said, his voice hollow. Jonathan switched to a video clip, security footage from a restaurant. Victoria and Richard laughing over wine, her wedding ring noticeably absent. To Andrew, Richard toasted on screen, the clueless craftsman who built our future. They clinked glasses, and Victoria leaned forward to kiss him. Andrew turned away. Turn it off. Jonathan complied immediately, the screen going black. 23 years, Andrew whispered. Was any of it real? Jonathan sat beside him again, closer this time. I don't know, but this isn't just an affair, Andrew. It's a conspiracy, financial fraud, forgery, deliberate planning to exploit you. Andrew stared at his reflection in the blank screen. She said I couldn't fight her. She was counting on it. She was wrong, Jonathan said, conviction hardening his voice. The court date is set for Thursday, 2 days from now. That soon? I expedited it. The evidence is strong enough that the judge agreed to an accelerated hearing. Jonathan's professional tone returned, but now it felt protective rather than distant. We'll be ready. You won't face this alone. Andrew nodded, meeting his brother's eyes. For a moment they sat in silence. 2 men shaped from the same heartwood, reconnecting through broken grain. Andrew's workshop had always been his sanctuary, a place where the world made sense through measured cuts and careful joins. Tonight, it felt hollow, the tools mere objects without meaning. He moved through the familiar space like a ghost, touching chisels and planes that had once felt like extensions of himself. A half-finished music box sat on his workbench, intended as an anniversary gift. 24 years would have been in June. He picked up a piece of cherry wood, feeling its weight, its potential now lost. His encounter with Victoria's attorney that afternoon played in his mind. The man, expensively dressed and coldly efficient, had approached him outside the school. "Mr. Harrison," he'd said, not offering his hand. "I'm Lawrence Prentice, representing your wife in the dissolution proceedings." "My attorney handles all communications," Andrew had responded, as Jonathan had instructed. Prentice's smile never reached his eyes. "I thought we might speak informally." "This doesn't need to be contentious." "By not contentious, you mean I should accept Victoria's terms? It would be simpler, less embarrassing." The implication hung in the air. Consider the personal details that might emerge in court. The threat was clear, but Andrew had simply walked away. Now, alone in his workshop, doubt crept in. What else might Victoria reveal? What other humiliations awaited? Andrew sat heavily on his stool, examining his hands, craftsman's hands, calloused and capable, hands that had built furniture, shaped students' futures, reached for a wife who had been plotting against him all along. Had his entire life been built on false assumptions? His marriage, his judgment of character, his belief in the honesty of others. He opened his phone to the photo of himself and Jonathan from years ago. They'd been close once, before pride and stubbornness had created distance. Now crisis had reconnected them. But would it last beyond the court date? Or would Jonathan return to his separate life once this was over? The thought of facing the future alone, no wife, possibly estranged from his brother again, questioning everything he'd believed about himself, felt unbearable. Andrew set the unfinished music box in a drawer. Maybe that's all his life amounted to: unfinished projects, incomplete connections, broken grain that couldn't be repaired. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. Tomorrow would bring the final preparations for court. Thursday would bring confrontation with the woman who had systematically dismantled his life. He stared at his tools, arranged in perfect order on the wall, each one designed for a specific purpose, for building and repairing. But some things, once broken, could never be fixed with tools alone. Andrew jolted awake at the sound of knocking. The kitchen clock read 11:48 p.m. Through the window, he saw Jonathan's Audi in the driveway. He opened the door to find his brother holding a thick folder and a paper bag. Jonathan looked different somehow, his customary suit replaced by jeans and a sweater, his professional polish softened by fatigue. "I know it's late," Jonathan said, "but I thought we should talk before tomorrow." Andrew stepped aside. "Come in." In the kitchen, Jonathan set down the bag, revealing 2 coffee cups from an all-night diner. "I remember you take it black." "You remembered that after 5 years?" Andrew asked, accepting the cup. "Some things you don't forget." Jonathan sat at the kitchen table, the overhead light casting shadows across his face. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not sure I am," Andrew admitted. "Everything I thought I knew." Jonathan nodded. "I know." Silence stretched between them, less tense than before, but still uncertain. "Why did you take my case?" Andrew finally asked. "After everything that happened with Mom and Dad's estate." Jonathan stared into his coffee. "It was never about the money." "Then what was it about? Pride? Stubbornness?" Jonathan looked up. "You chose to keep the cabin instead of selling it like I wanted. I felt dismissed. I just wanted to preserve something of them," Andrew said softly. "I know that now." Jonathan's professional veneer cracked further. 5 years, Andrew. 5 years of holidays alone, birthdays with unopened cards. I sent cards? Every year. I never opened them. I never thought you'd answer if I called, Andrew confessed, until I had no choice. The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking clock. In that space between words, something shifted. I should have called, Jonathan finally said, after Elizabeth left me 3 years ago. Andrew looked up sharply. You were divorced. I never knew. Career-focused attorney neglects marriage. Not exactly an original story. Jonathan's laugh held no humor. Guess we both ended up with the wrong partners. Andrew reached across the table, a gesture that would have been impossible days ago. I'm sorry, John. The childhood nickname hung in the air, a bridge across 5 years of silence. Me too. Jonathan's voice roughened. But tomorrow, we fight back. Together. Jonathan spread documents across the kitchen table, transforming it into a war room. Legal briefs, financial records, and photographs formed a mosaic of betrayal and response. Here's our approach, he said, voice shifting to strategy mode, though lacking its earlier professional distance. We're pursuing 3 angles simultaneously. Andrew leaned forward, following his brother's practiced movements as he organized the evidence. First, financial fraud. Jonathan indicated a stack of bank statements, the unauthorized transfers, the forged documents on the equity line. That's criminal behavior, not just divorce tactics. Will they arrest her? Andrew asked. We're focusing on civil penalties first, but criminal charges remain an option. Jonathan refilled their coffee cups. Second angle, breach of fiduciary duty. As your spouse, Victoria had legal obligations regarding joint assets. Andrew nodded, surprising himself with his growing understanding of legal terminology. Third angle, and this is where we gain leverage, communication evidence showing conspiracy and premeditation. Jonathan tapped the messages they'd reviewed earlier. The judge won't look kindly on this level of calculated exploitation. What's our best-case outcome? Andrew asked. Return of all diverted funds, fair division of remaining assets, no spousal support awarded to Victoria, and potential punitive damages for the forgery. Jonathan's eyes gleamed with determination. Worst case, still better than what she demanded. And Richard Hale, potentially liable as a co-conspirator. His brokerage could face investigation for the shell company transactions. Andrew studied his brother's meticulous preparations, tabs color-coded, arguments sequenced, contingencies planned. This wasn't just professional competence, it was protection. You've done all this in just a few days, Andrew said. Jonathan paused. I pulled my best team. Called in favors. Some people worked around the clock. Why? Jonathan met his eyes directly. Because you're my brother. The simple truth hung between them, powerful in its clarity. What do you need from me tomorrow? Andrew asked, straightening his shoulders. Just be honest. Answer questions directly. Let me handle the legal maneuvers. Jonathan's lips curved slightly. And maybe trust that not everyone betrays the people they're supposed to care about. Andrew nodded, feeling something long dormant awakening. Not just anger at Victoria's betrayal, but determination to stand alongside his brother. I can do that, he said. Pre-dawn light filtered through the kitchen windows as Andrew adjusted his tie. He'd barely slept, but a strange clarity had replaced his earlier despair. Jonathan emerged from the guest room, already dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, every inch the formidable attorney. Coffee's ready, Andrew said. They moved around each other with the half-remembered rhythm of family. Jonathan retrieving mugs, while Andrew found sugar, a choreography that survived despite years of disuse. We should leave in 30 minutes, Jonathan said, checking his watch. I want us there well before Victoria and her counsel. Andrew nodded, then paused. I found something last night, after you went to sleep. He retrieved a small wooden box from the counter, hand-carved with intricate leaf patterns. I made this years ago, never gave it to you. Jonathan took it carefully, running his fingers over the precisely joined corners and smooth finish. It was supposed to be a peace offering, Andrew explained. After our fight, I just never found the right moment to send it. Jonathan opened the box. Inside lay a small brass compass, nestled in velvet. Dad's compass, Jonathan said quietly. I thought you should have it. You were always the one with the sense of direction. Jonathan closed the box carefully, his composure wavering for a moment. Thank you. They finished their preparations in companionable silence. As Andrew knotted his tie, he caught their reflection in the hallway mirror. Two men with the same jawline, the same eyes, the same resolute expression. We look alike, Andrew observed. Never noticed how much. Mom always said we were cut from the same wood, Jonathan replied, straightening his already perfect tie. Just finished differently. The rising sun broke fully over the horizon as they stepped onto the porch, painting the world in golden light. Andrew locked the door to a house that might not remain his after today, yet somehow mattered less than it had before. Whatever happens in court, Andrew said, I'm glad we're facing it together. Jonathan placed the compass box carefully in his briefcase. Family grain runs deep, Andrew. Sometimes it just takes the right kind of pressure to reveal it. They walked to Jonathan's car, two figures moving in unison against the dawn light, brothers again after years apart, heading toward confrontation, but no longer alone. The county courthouse loomed like a marble fortress, its high ceilings and ornate pillars designed to make ordinary people feel small. Andrew sat alone at the defendant's table, acutely aware of the empty chair beside him. Jonathan had insisted on making a separate entrance after receiving a call on their way into the building. Across the aisle, Victoria sat with Lawrence Prentice, both impeccably dressed and exuding confidence. She hadn't looked directly at Andrew once, though Prentice occasionally glanced over with thinly veiled condescension. Their whispered conference was punctuated by Victoria's slight smile, the same smile she'd worn when serving him divorce papers. Andrew fought to control his breathing as the courtroom filled. Several of his teaching colleagues had arrived in silent support, sitting in the back row. He nodded gratefully toward them, drawing strength from their presence. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Whitfield presiding. Judge Whitfield, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and piercing eyes, took her seat and surveyed the courtroom. Harrison versus Harrison, she noted, reviewing the file. Counsel, please identify yourselves for the record. Prentice rose smoothly. Lawrence Prentice for the petitioner, Victoria Harrison, Your Honor. The judge looked expectantly toward Andrew. Before he could speak, the courtroom doors swung open. Jonathan strode in, flanked by two associates carrying document boxes. His presence commanded immediate attention. Shoulders squared, expression focused, every inch the formidable attorney whose reputation preceded him. Victoria's composure cracked visibly. She grabbed Prentice's arm, whispering urgently. The attorney's face tightened as he recognized Jonathan. Jonathan Harrison for the respondent, Andrew Harrison, Your Honor, Jonathan announced, his voice resonating through the suddenly silent courtroom. I apologize for the delay. As Jonathan took his seat beside Andrew, he squeezed his brother's shoulder briefly, a gesture not of professional reassurance, but of family solidarity. Judge Whitfield's eyebrow raised slightly. Counsel shares the respondent's surname. The respondent is my brother, Your Honor, Jonathan acknowledged. No conflict of interest has been identified. The judge nodded. Very well, Mr. Prentice, you may proceed with your opening statement. But Prentice's earlier confidence had visibly diminished, his glance toward Victoria betraying the first hint of uncertainty. Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate that Victoria Harrison engaged in systematic financial fraud, breached fiduciary duty, and conspired to deprive my client of his rightful marital assets, Jonathan began, his voice calm yet commanding. For the next hour, he methodically dismantled Victoria's case. Financial records displayed on a projection screen tracked every unauthorized transfer. Banking experts testified to the irregular patterns. A forensic document examiner confirmed Victoria's forgery on the equity line documents. And this signature, Jonathan asked, indicating the loan document, in your professional opinion, was not written by Andrew Harrison? Definitively not, the examiner stated. The formation of key letters and pressure patterns are inconsistent with Mr. Harrison's verified signature samples. Andrew watched Victoria's face growing paler with each revelation. Her attorney raised frequent objections, most overruled by Judge Whitfield, whose expression grew increasingly severe. Your Honor, we call Richard Hale, Jonathan announced. Victoria's head snapped up as her lover entered the courtroom, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Under Jonathan's precise questioning, Hale reluctantly confirmed the timeline of their relationship and his knowledge of the financial maneuvers. Mr. Hale, did you receive funds diverted from the Harrisons' joint accounts through Vista Properties? Hale glanced at Victoria, then at his own attorney seated behind him. On advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Jonathan nodded as if expecting this. No further questions for this witness. As the evidence mounted, text messages and emails appeared on screen. Victoria and Richard planning, calculating, mocking Andrew's trust. Several audible gasps came from the gallery when particularly cruel exchanges were revealed. And finally, Your Honor, Jonathan said, approaching the bench with a document. Bank records showing the $60,000 diverted to the Cayman account was withdrawn 2 days ago, after our discovery requests were filed. Prentice rose. Objection, Your Honor. These allegations are inflammatory, and these allegations are documented, Jonathan interrupted, presenting the withdrawal records, and I believe constitute evidence tampering and attempt to hide assets during legal proceedings. Judge Whitfield reviewed the documents, her expression hardening. Objection overruled. The court takes a very dim view of such actions, Mr. Prentice. Andrew maintained his composure throughout, though his hands trembled slightly beneath the table. He'd insisted on hearing everything, refusing to be shielded from the truth no matter how painful. As Jonathan concluded his presentation, the courtroom fell silent with the weight of evidence laid bare. Judge Whitfield's chambers call lasted 40 minutes, during which Andrew and Jonathan waited in a small conference room while Victoria and her attorney remained in the courtroom. When they returned, the atmosphere had shifted palpably. Victoria no longer met anyone's eyes, while Prentice's earlier arrogance had given way to grim resignation. Having reviewed the evidence, Judge Whitfield began, her voice stern, this court finds compelling proof of financial misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to defraud. She turned her gaze directly to Victoria. Mrs. Harrison, your actions demonstrate a disturbing pattern of calculated deception against your spouse. The court orders the immediate return of all diverted funds, totaling $90,000 plus interest. Victoria stared at the table before her, unmoving. Furthermore, the court rejects your petition for spousal support. The forgery of documents constitutes a serious offense that could warrant criminal charges, which Mr. Harrison may pursue separately if he chooses. Judge Whitfield continued with the division of remaining assets, awarding Andrew the house and directing an equitable split of legitimate savings. Each pronouncement further dismantled Victoria's scheme until nothing remained of her demands. This ruling is effective immediately, the judge concluded. Court is adjourned. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed through the silent room. Victoria rose quickly, avoiding Andrew's eyes as she swept past, Prentice following with his briefcase. The victory was complete and unequivocal. Several colleagues approached to congratulate Andrew, but their voices seemed distant as he watched Victoria disappear through the courtroom doors. The woman he'd loved for 23 years, now a stranger revealed. "You won," Jonathan said quietly, organizing his documents. "Everything she took will be returned." Andrew nodded, feeling oddly detached. "Yes." Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters who had gotten wind of the case approached, but Jonathan skillfully deflected them. The brothers stood for a moment in the afternoon sun, victory achieved, but somehow incomplete. "I should feel something more," Andrew admitted, as they walked toward the parking lot. "Relief, satisfaction, something." Jonathan nodded in understanding. Legal victories don't heal what's broken inside. Andrew glanced at his brother. "Then what does?" Jonathan placed the case files in his trunk, then turned to face Andrew. "I don't know yet, but maybe we figure that out together." They drove away from the courthouse in silence. The battle won, but the war against emptiness still to be fought. The restaurant Jonathan had chosen for their celebration dinner was upscale but quiet, white tablecloths, subdued lighting, and discreet service. Andrew sat across from his brother, tie loosened and jacket draped over his chair. The court victory was barely 3 hours old, yet it already felt distant, abstract. "To justice served," Jonathan said, raising his glass. Andrew lifted his in response, but set it down without drinking. The amber liquid held no appeal. "Something wrong with the scotch?" Jonathan asked. "It's 18 years old." "Nothing wrong with it," Andrew replied. "Just doesn't taste like anything I want right now." Jonathan studied him, then set his own glass down untouched. "I know that feeling." "Shouldn't I feel something more?" Andrew asked. "Relief, vindication. I just feel empty." "The law provides remedies, not healing," Jonathan said, loosening his own tie. "I've won hundreds of cases." The satisfaction never lasts. Around them, other diners celebrated business deals or anniversaries, their laughter highlighting the brothers' subdued mood. A waiter approached with menus, but Jonathan waved him away. "I'm not really hungry," Andrew admitted. "Me neither." Jonathan leaned back. "After my divorce was finalized, I won a major case the same week. Should have been on top of the world. Instead, I sat alone in my condo staring at the wall for 3 days." Andrew looked up, surprised by the confession. "What helped?" "Eventually, I mean." Jonathan considered this. "Work, at first. Buried myself in it. But that's just postponing, not healing." They sat in understanding silence for a moment. Andrew absent-mindedly traced the wood grain of the table with his finger. "I've spent 23 years building something that wasn't real. Now I have to figure out what is." Jonathan watched the gesture, then suddenly straightened. "You know, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about. Something we both inherited, but neither of us has dealt with." "What's that?" "The old house, Mom and Dad's place." Andrew hadn't thought about their parents' home in years, the modest 2-story where they'd grown up, sitting abandoned since their parents' deaths, the property that had sparked their estrangement. "It's still just sitting there?" Andrew asked. Jonathan nodded. I couldn't sell it without your signature, and I couldn't bring myself to ask. And I couldn't let it go, Andrew admitted. So we both just left it. Maybe it's time we did something about it, Jonathan suggested, a new light in his eyes. Together. The Harrison family home stood at the end of a tree-lined street, its once white paint now gray with neglect. Overgrown shrubs pressed against peeling windowsills, and the front steps sagged slightly. Andrew and Jonathan stood side by side at the gate, taking in the physical manifestation of their shared past and mutual neglect. Looks worse than I remembered, Jonathan said, unlocking the rusted padlock. Better than I feared, Andrew countered, his craftsman's eye assessing the structure. Foundation seems sound, roof lines still straight. They made their way up the cracked walkway. Jonathan fumbled with old keys until the front door swung open with a protesting creak. Inside, furniture sat, draped in yellowed sheets like silent ghosts. Dust motes danced in the beams of light filtering through grimy windows. Remember how Mom always kept those windows spotless? Jonathan said, his voice hushed in the still air. Andrew nodded, moving carefully through the living room. Dad would complain about the vinegar smell every spring cleaning, but he'd still help her reach the high ones. They moved through the house like archaeologists, uncovering layers of their shared history. And the kitchen where their mother had taught them both to cook, the dining room table where homework was completed and family decisions debated, the back porch where their father had first shown Andrew how to sand wood properly. I haven't been back since the funeral, Jonathan admitted, running his finger along a dusty shelf. Me neither. Andrew paused at the foot of the stairs. We really just left it all here. Too busy fighting over whether to sell it or keep it, so we did neither. They climbed to the second floor, their childhood bedrooms still intact, frozen in time. Jonathan's filled with debate trophies and law school acceptance letters. Andrew's with woodworking projects and sketches. You were already building things, Jonathan observed, examining a small, uneven bookshelf. You were already arguing cases, Andrew replied, pointing to a framed certificate from a high school debate championship. In their parents' bedroom, family photos still lined the dresser, the four of them at the lake, at graduations, at Jonathan's law school commencement. The last photo showed only the brothers, standing awkwardly at their father's funeral, already beginning to drift apart. Andrew ran his hand along the solid oak dresser built by his father decades ago. The structure's sound throughout, cosmetic damage, mostly, some water issues to address. Are you assessing the house or us? Jonathan asked, with a small smile. Andrew looked up, meeting his brother's eyes. Both, I suppose. Could it be restored? The house, I mean. Andrew surveyed the room with a craftsman's eye. It would take work, a lot of work, but yes. What if that's what we did? Jonathan said. Instead of selling it or letting it sit here, what if we restored it, together? The possibility hung in the air between them, unexpected, yet somehow inevitable. 3 weeks later, the Harrison house hummed with purposeful activity. What had begun as basic cleanup had evolved into full renovation, with Andrew directing the project and Jonathan providing both labor and financing. Today, they tackled the living room walls, removing damaged drywall to assess the structure beneath. Hand me that pry bar, Andrew called from atop a stepladder. He worked methodically, his movements precise from decades of teaching proper technique. Jonathan passed the tool up. Still can't believe how much you know about this stuff. You sound surprised that teaching woodshop actually involved skills, Andrew teased, carefully removing a section of damaged wall. Not surprised, impressed. Jonathan held a trash bag, ready for debris. though I still maintain that corporate law also involves actual work." "Fair enough," Andrew conceded. "Your closing argument was pretty impressive." They had fallen into an easy rhythm over the weeks, their natural rapport returning through shared purpose. Workdays began early and ended late, with takeout dinners eaten amid sawdust and paint swatches. They'd hired contractors for specialized work like electrical and plumbing, but kept the core renovation tasks for themselves. "Wait," Andrew said suddenly, peering into the opening he'd created. "There's something here." Behind the drywall, in a space between studs, sat a small metal box. Andrew carefully extracted it and climbed down. "What is it?" Jonathan asked, setting aside his work gloves. "I don't know. Dad must have put it here during the renovation he did when we were kids." Andrew brushed off decades of dust and opened the latch. Inside lay a collection of family photos they'd never seen, their parents as young newlyweds standing in front of the house, looking nervous and proud. Baby pictures of both brothers. A handwritten letter in their father's distinctive script. "To my sons," Jonathan read aloud, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "If you're reading this, you've chosen to care for this house rather than sell it. I hope you're doing it together. Nothing we built matters as much as what you build with each other." Andrew carefully lifted out more photos, the four of them working on the house together, Jonathan and Andrew as teenagers, helping their father install the very walls they were now removing. "He knew we might fight over it someday," Jonathan said quietly. "And he hoped we'd find our way back," Andrew added, studying a photo of himself and Jonathan, arms around each other's shoulders, covered in paint and laughing. They sat amid the construction debris, passing photos back and forth, recalling stories, filling in gaps in each other's memories. Outside, the afternoon sun cast lengthening shadows through windows they'd recently restored to their mother's standard of cleanliness. "What do you think we should do with it when we're finished?" Jonathan asked eventually. Andrew considered the question, looking around at the work they'd done and all that remained. "I'm not sure it matters as much as the fact that we're doing it together." Jonathan nodded, carefully returning the photos to their box. "I think Dad would agree with that." They returned to work, side by side, rebuilding what had been broken, both the house and something deeper, more essential between them. 6 months after the courthouse victory, the Harrison family home stood transformed. Fresh white paint gleamed in the autumn sunlight, new windows sparkled, and the front garden flourished with late-season blooms. Inside, the renovation had breathed new life into old spaces while preserving the home's essential character, much like the relationship between the men who had restored it. Andrew stood in what had once been his childhood bedroom, now converted into a workshop filled with his tools and half-finished projects. Through the window, he could see Jonathan on the phone in the backyard, gesturing as he spoke. Still the attorney, even on weekends, yet something fundamental had shifted in both of them. "I never thought losing almost everything would lead to finding what matters," Andrew mused, running his hand along a cabinet he was building for the kitchen. The wisdom hadn't come easily. In woodworking, Andrew had always known that the strongest joints were those that had been stressed, precisely cut, and carefully fitted. Now he understood that relationships followed the same principle. Pressure revealed the grain, testing showed the weak points, and proper repairs made the whole stronger than before. When Jonathan came in, he brought coffee in the mugs they'd found in their mother's cupboards. "The place looks good," he said, an understatement for the months of dedicated work. "It's getting there," Andrew agreed, "though I'm not sure restoration work is ever really finished." Between them sat their father's compass, now displayed in a small case Andrew had crafted from wood salvaged during the renovation. It had become their shared symbol, a reminder that even when separated, they remained oriented toward the same center. Neither brother lived in the house full-time. Andrew still taught, Jonathan still practiced law, but weekends found them here, building together what had been broken separately. The divorce that had threatened to destroy Andrew's life had instead revealed a foundation worth salvaging, one laid long before his marriage. Some breaks couldn't be repaired, but others, when properly rejoined, revealed the true grain of a life well built.